Hello, welcome back to Messenger Motorworks. We're going to get some more things done on the Saab today, namely a O2 sensor from China, a mass airflow sensor from China. If you'd seen my last Saab video, I talked about having some sort of fueling issue, and then I fumbled through replacing the fuel pump. That did not fix the problem. It might be a little bit more spry throughout the rev band, but it did not solve me kind of running out of fuel. At around 5,000 RPM, depending on which gear you're in. Funny enough, first gear doesn't really ever hit it, which could mean that it is a load issue where the mass airflow sensor could be misreading the air coming into the car. First gear and second gear have torque limiters on them. Those torque limiters are generally gauged by the amount of air that's rushing into the car. And if the torque limiter hits before the meter actually measures that air, then it might not actually ever reach that cut, or this thing, the ECU, gets all confused because maybe this starts giving it a wonky signal over a certain amount of volume of air flowing through it. So that's kind of a theory that I have, a running theory about my little weird problem, because the car runs brilliantly until it seems to reach a certain amount of load and then just drops off quite badly. Doesn't seem like a fueling issue. I do somewhere have a fuel pressure gauge, because I know those of you out there that know how to properly diagnose a car, unlike me, would say, well, put a gauge on the fuel rail. My gauge is MIA, so this is a high mileage car. I'm just replacing bits anyway. I do have a engine light on, and it says something about the catalytic converter. Now this has an old genuine Saab turbo back exhaust on it, 3-inch, and it has their old race cat. It's saying there's something wrong with the catalytic converter. It's a very weird code. I'll post it. I'll throw the letters somewhere, but it's about the catalytic converter aging, I believe. I'll correct myself again with letters or words somewhere on the screen. I can't quite remember now. I have the second lambda, or the downstream O2 sensor, just turned off in the tune, because why? I don't have to pass emissions here. I don't really care if it knows what's going on after the catalytic converter. As far as I'm concerned, the catalytic converter doesn't need to be there. Now, I did put 2 and 2 together and smelled a little something funny after a long trip. A little rotten eggy smell. Could have been the catalytic converter. That race cat in there might be kaput. So that's going to be another part of the diagnosis here. If I can't quite get things to run properly, I should probably just replace it anyway, or gut it. I have a couple little exhaust leaks. This is a very old exhaust system. I might do a video actually of me patching this 3-inch exhaust. I don't know if I'm going to go inside or outside of it, what I'm going to do, but most of the unions are pretty well rotted. The system's probably been on there for 10, 15 years, something like that. The car is only 18 years old, but the original owner of this car was the enthusiast that did all of the work to the car. So that's where that's at. I'm going to open this hood, set up the camera, and we'll go about changing a couple little things like this. Oh, fun little bit here. The Saab's twice module works, and I repaired my keyless entry by changing the battery in the key. I bought the battery when I first bought the car, knowing that these are probably dead, but having owned Saabs with bad keyless remote systems before, and understanding that the battery probably wasn't going to fix anything, I took like a couple of months to fix it. But check this out. They work brilliantly. And the range is pretty good too. Not that the range needs to be that good because it doesn't have remote start, but the trunk even works. Just couldn't be happier. Very chuffed that this 18-year-old keyless entry system on a car with questionable electronics functions. Also, I did a little bit more tinkering with the rear parking sensors. Should have recorded that, but my rear parking sensors are now functioning. So slowly and surely building things back up on this car. I still do have the rain sensor. I might also change this in another video, maybe tonight, maybe another night. It's a little bit low priority, but I will be changing this, and maybe we can get those automatic sensors to work. If I can get those automatic sensors to work, and I can get the ECU to fuel itself, to fuel the engine properly, we're going to be in pretty good shape here. It's not a perfect looking car, and you can maybe tell from the video on my phone camera that this car is dirty and salty from the roads right now, but I'm getting happier and happier and happier with this vehicle. So let's see if we can tie a few more things up. All right. Okay, here we go. We're going to start with the mass airflow sensor, and then we'll move down to the upstream O2 sensor over there. So this is a very straightforward job. Thankfully, one of the easier jobs on a Saab to do. Now, generally, I don't think Saabs are all that difficult to work on. The old adage of it's foreign, it's European, it must be more difficult or frustrating to work on, or really even parts be more difficult to get, doesn't really apply to Saabs. They weren't badly designed cars. Quite frankly, it doesn't really apply to anything. It's this weird old excuse for shops to charge more money or to just reject the work altogether. I don't think that, you know, in the 80s, a Civic was that hard to work on. Maybe the old CCV engines, they had like 60 vacuum hoses. They were these crazy carbureted vehicles. There might have been some accuracy to the statement back then, but this is a pretty easy car to work on. I've certainly worked on plenty of American cars that could have been more difficult than this or a little bit easier than this, but I've had these engines out of 9.3s and 9.5s and 900s. They really are not complicated vehicles. Actually, in some ways, they're very, very thoughtfully designed. BMWs. People complain about those, but I've found BMWs to be quite thoughtfully designed. You know what's hard to work on? That old 77 Saab, or Mercedes rather. That is a difficult thing to work on. You'd think with that monstrous engine bay that you could house a small family in would be simple. It's not. Changing the rear most spark plugs are very difficult. Anyway, that's a tangent that I'll back away from now. So this is the old O2 sensor. Now, I've cleaned this once. For those of you out there that could be thinking, well, did you try cleaning it? Yes, I did try cleaning it. And also for those of you that may have laughed at me in my last video struggling with that plug, I got it right off this time. That is a loose nut in my coil pack. Loose bolt, rather. That is very interesting. I'm going to have to tighten that. Okay, that is pretty much all there is to it. Now, we're going to grab the new one. Do a little bit comparing. This Chinesium brand Most Plus. Not terribly confident in that. Let's see, the overall design. The fasteners are exactly the same. This seems to have larger holes in the diaphragm here. Diaphragm's not the right word. In the grid, the honeycomb grid here. This plug has some broken bits. That still has the filler in it. Need to remember to take that out. The other side, really they're pretty simple. Obviously the hot wires are going to be all in the same position in there, or it might not measure exactly like the factory one. The aftermarket one has the direction arrow on it. And this aftermarket Chinese unit really seems to be a very this is interesting here. That has some yellow writing on it. And you know what that could mean? That could mean that this is a junkyard part. That's somewhat telling and troubling. Not really troubling. It is telling though. This might not actually be the car's factory air cleaner. Who knows what kind of life this thing has had? So maybe not all bad that we are repairing it. This has no writing on this side. This has some, it says air meter this side towards the air cleaner. This could be a factory part, although a lot of factory Saab parts said Saab on them, even ones that they supplied. This does not. So who knows what the history is there. We got our new Chinese one. It says Most Plus and has a part number on it. Probably doesn't match the part number that's on this unit. Not even close. What do you do? Doesn't really matter that much. A lot of companies used this air meter. It's not a unique to Saab part filler that comes in to protect the connections there. Contact points, we're gonna get that right on there. Gently kind of push this thing down. It's keyed. That's nice. Here, maybe I'll bring the camera over. Show. It's a keyed unit. Runs right into the rubber there. And the rubber on this side has a little key in it. I like that. I like keys. I like good cues. That tells me when I'm doing something properly and when I am not. It's so often the latter that I really appreciate when I can just know, oh, that is binding. Just a moment. Let's get some PB. Hold on a second. Oh, we had PB very close. We're just gonna throw this clamp of bone, lube her up. Clamps that are binding can peel themselves apart, which you don't want. It'll grip this side and just yank itself out of its casing, and you'll have a bad day trying to find a store with a 3-inch clamp that has this special little mount soldered to it. It's going to be worse than a bad day. You're just not going to find it, and you'll be rigging something up to work, and that's no fun. That's no fun. I'm just going to inspect some things down here. There is some vacuum action happening down here, a little actuator, and then a hard line. It all kind of looks to be in good shape. I don't see anything torn. That's something that I've just been keeping an eye out with on this car, because I am having a little bit of a run condition. I'm keeping an eye out for issues that I could spot right away. Last time I was working on this thing underneath the hood, I found a decaying vacuum line, for example. Probably wasn't creating a problem yet, but it doesn't hurt to replace it. A little bit of a squish. Make sure that you are wrapped all the way around the bottom of the mass airflow sensor. If this thing is leaking on either side of it, you're not gonna get a good measurement of air. You want a good seal on both sides of this thing. I'm gonna go ahead and just lube up the hose clamp here before I even start. And maybe even this one, although this seems to be a fresher clamp, not actually the right size, but don't care. Not a show vehicle, just need it to get me through the winters while my Alpha hibernates. Yeah, that's nice. Nice and smooth now. Okay, we got there. And there she is. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and grab a 10mm wrench. For you other Saab people out there, you're obviously a Saab person watching this, be careful with torquing these. This one's stripped out. It was stripped out when I got the car. I'm not just trying to put the blame on somebody else. I have stripped these out myself. It's very easy to over torque them, which is probably why I under torque them. I mean, I'm not actually putting a spec on them. I'm just giving them some and seeing how it goes. but I probably underdid it for fear of doing what somebody did with that one there. You'll also notice that somebody must have lost the original fasteners there or stripped them out. They're usually inverted torques. That was relatively simple. The next one's going to be a little bit more difficult. I'm going to take my ring off so as not to do any damage to that thing. I'm going to reposition this camera and we're going to go at that down there. Okay? All right, here we go. Firstly, let's go ahead and take this thing out of our way a bit, even if only to give the camera a little bit better of a view. I don't like screwing around this thing too much. Its connection to the Cobra pipe over here is usually delicate. I don't even like taking this little clamp thing off down here. There's this tiny little L-shaped bracket that goes down into the recess to hold this aluminum pipe in. And it's important because this area, it is important as the engine can move around. This thing could shift and come out, and then you start to lose metered air. Don't want to lose metered air. So carefully bring those two pieces out. I will grab a magnetic tray, which I'm trying to be in the habit of using. Then we pull this guy off here carefully. Do some, I think we pull this side out first, let it all flex around, and get that off. It's clear that somebody was into performance before. They also have a, I think that's a Forge branded, yeah, Forge branded aftermarket bypass valve with a nice metal. Oh yeah, that feels nice. Okay, so that's off. We have direct access to the O2 sensor. The camera can't see it. That sucks. I need to move the camera so you can see what I'm doing. Just a moment. That's better. As you can imagine, I do not have a sophisticated camera system here. Anyway, this is the line. Now this looks very factory, and if it isn't factory, this O2 sensor, it's a very nice O2 sensor. Not what I bought at all. This has this really nice anti-crimp sort of addition to the O2 sensor here, and then the wires finally come out here. This is super high quality. It might be factory. If it's factory, it's got 157,000 miles, and how could you possibly trust the readings from a 157,000 mile O2 sensor? I'm not sure you can. It does look like it's been on there for a long time. I'm sure we're going to struggle to get it off. That should be somewhat comical. All right. Now, this is really just as simple as following this thing here back. Now, most 9.5s and 9.3s with this engine had a nice little bracket, but as you can imagine, over time, cars get worked on, taken apart, put back together, those brackets get lost. Now, of course, I'm going to struggle with this one. Okay. It's a typical Saab keyed connection that seems to enjoy owning me. I swear at one point I was good at these. Ah. All right. Pretty simple. Yeah, there's supposed to be a bracket. If you have one of these that's in pristine, untouched condition, there's a little bracket. This one's missing the little bracket. Gosh, I have another thing down here that isn't tightened all the way. Okay. All right, so I bought a new tool. I have changed dozens of O2 sensors. Never have I bothered to get the 7/8 O2 sensor tool. I finally have, you'll find out through these videos I'm a bit of a cheapie when it comes to certain things. Sometimes I overspend or spend the right amount, but most of the time I buy cheap tools. And here's why. I'm not in a commercial environment where this tool will get used dozens of times a week. I'm in a home environment in my very messy but productive garage where this thing might get used a couple of times a year. So buying a $50 Snap-on O2 sensor wrench doesn't make sense. Buying an $8 one off of Amazon and risking it shearing or snapping just makes a little bit more sense considering the situation. So that thing just slides over the wire and it'll find a spot. There we go. Now, if this functions properly, we should be able to just spin this thing off. Oh boy, this is already starting out poorly. The 3/8 won't even go into the hole. That is troubling. Huh. Okay, well, remember that talking about buying a cheap tool that I just did? This could be a deterrent for buying this particular cheap tool. Give me a moment while I convince this thing it should do as I say. Okay, well, I've got it part of the way in there. I'll put a link to the Amazon tool not to buy. I don't think that's slander. I think that's just consumer advice, right? Consumer Reports tells you not to buy vehicles all the time. I'm going to put a link to the Amazon page that is listed on. So you guys at home cannot buy it. Okay, I lost my wrench. Hold on. Found my wrench. How badly you guys think I'm going to struggle with this? I've never had to show muscle on YouTube before. Oh yeah, that is on there. Here we go. Oh, gosh. Wow. Yep, that's on there. That's on there really well. Okay, breaker bar. I'm gonna adapt up to 1/2 inch with an impact adapter and get my breaker bar out. Okay. Adapter. Breaker bar. I'm gonna go for the pushing option. Hold that thing square. Oh, what was that, huh? Did I just skip on it? Oh no, I loosened it. Wow, guys, look at that. That was successful. Once the breaker was on there, I really didn't have to put that much power into it to get her to come loose. That is satisfying, huh? Can't argue with that. Oh, I just lost my grip in there. So I can just get it to hold on well enough. This tool is not great. I'm going to link to the tool not to buy. This is a very poorly machined part. That is a shame. All right, I got to do a little bit more convincing here in just a moment. Okay, just realized I may have said machined part earlier. I think this is pretty clearly just a badly cast part. I tried a different extension, hammering it into there. See if there was just some tolerance. Oh, that is just not moving again. I guess part of this YouTube channel was meant to be watching me struggle. Success there. Some real torque on it. It seems to be binding up for some reason. Oh. Oh boy, that does not feel good at all. Something's going on there. It seems to be struggling. I don't really think this is going to do me any good, but I think maybe we'll spray some penetrating lubricant into there. Yeah, most of it just goes down the side of the exhaust, of course. Some of it seems to sink into there. So you probably can't tell from the image, but this wall here, so it's kind of got the same round shape as my finger. Part of the casting went bad there. It's diving into the square. I'm going to pause the video for a moment and see about maybe just filing that down. Here we go. Okay, so what I did was took my Dremel with a side cutting bit and tried to flatten that bulge out, and it seemed to work a little bit. I could probably spend more time on it, but you know, quite frankly, it's cold and I got this thing to shove in there quite a bit further, so I'm going to try to go in the tightening direction with this. Okay, she's turning pretty well in the tightening direction. Maybe just a little bit of working back and forth with it would help. There we go. Another turn, reverse. Then I'll go forward. Yeah, you know what? I think that JB Weld, gosh, wrong thing entirely. PB Blaster went a long way. That stuff, when you don't expect it to, works brilliantly when you need it to. Rarely comes through, but really overall a great product. I'm feeling good about it tonight. So PB Blaster has our vote for greatest product on the planet. Okay, there it is. Oh. Yeah, don't really know if that looks good or bad, because frankly, a brand new O2 sensor could look like that just after a few minutes of running. So I did run a test, an O2 sensor test with my scanner, and it did claim that the O2 sensor was responding properly, but that really only means that its resistance range is what it should be. Don't really know how accurate that is. Here is my new O2 sensor. Designs for O2 sensors vary wildly. These ones are pretty similar. Some of the other designs I saw while I was shopping, you know, had a lot different kind of tips on them. Looks like they actually put some anti-seize on there for me. That's very kind of them, and there is a little bit of a anti-kink protection there. This was $21 and is an actual fit to Saab's keyed plug type of thing there, which is great. I'm gonna go ahead and screw this thing back in. Not a rare plug. It was used on Chryslers and Volvos, and I think maybe even... Oh yeah, the same exact sensor is used on the 996 and 997 generation Porsche 911s and Porsche Boxsters with the old, gosh, what is it, M55 engine or whatever. I had a 2001 911 C2 for a little while and probably bought these same exact plugs. I remember thinking it was just kind of interesting that the only thing on that Porsche that had these style of plugs were the O2 sensors. And I knew they were familiar because I knew that Saab used them for a lot of their sensor engagements. Let's see, this thing's not going in there brilliantly. Just gonna put a little bit of power onto it and see. Yeah, it's accepting its new reality. Put a little bit more torque on it with the breaker. Probably don't need to do too much. I'm a small guy. I'm relatively weak when it comes to tightening and loosening things. I rely on leverage. Gosh, that's going really easily with that big breaker bar on there. I don't want to overdo it, so I think I'll stop there. Now, new O2 sensors do have a little compression washer at the end of the threads. This once had a compression washer there. It is there. It's just kind of a rusted hulk now that's probably been flattened a couple of times. I guess if it leaks, I'll tighten it up a little bit more. Here's the cable. Unwind it from all the twisting. I'm just going to kind of run it in the same general direction the other sensor was ran in to get it over to its plug. Engaged with its plug. Please work. And it did. And I'm going to tuck it down next to its harness and its other plug buddies. And there we go. Okay, that is the O2 sensor swapped. I'm going to go ahead and assemble this. Okay, well, let's reset the camera. Okay, now we've replaced a couple of things that the ECU uses to diagnose how the engine is running. We want to reset the ECU. I don't want to pull the battery, so we want to pull fuse 17. I think this is the same on both the 9.3s, the second generation 900s, the first generation 9.3s, and the first generation 9.5s are all this fuse 17, and in this spot is the third row down and number 3 over. So I'm going to grab the little fuse puller here. I'm going to pull this 20 amp fuse. We lose dome and some other things, but that fuse manages the engine management system. Leave it unplugged for a little while. Let any capacitors that are holding on to juice in the ECU discharge, decharge, uncharge. It's discharge, I think. Yeah. And then there we go. Plop that thing back in there. Here, a couple things move around under there. Put this back in its place. I seem to always replace the cover without actually putting the fuse puller back. Get that in there gracefully. There we go. We'll start her up. See if that O2 sensor leaks, shall we? Quite badly. Correction, no it doesn't. That was just reverberations off the back wall. The smoke is just a lot of burning off PB blaster. It doesn't appear to be leaking at all. Alright. Well, that's that. We changed the two primary ways that the ECU understands how the engine is running. I'm going to drive it for a few days. We now reset the ECU. We'll just kind of see how it goes. Maybe it'll fix the fueling problem, maybe it won't. If not, I'll be back with another video on doing something different that might fix the fueling problem. I'm going to double, triple check that I have a factory tune running on the ECU, and also might have to bite the bullet getting a new genuine Saab downpipe with a catalytic converter, or doing some shifty stuff where I maybe just drill out the catalytic converter and gut it myself and put the system back together. I don't really want to do that. I want to try to keep the car as kosher as possible, but I will because this is a budget car. And I don't really care that much as long as it just runs the way that it is supposed to run. So, until next time, thanks for watching.